The courtroom smelled like old paper and floor wax, and my husband was under oath, telling everyone that I had never sent a dime. Bryce sat in the witness chair, the way he sat everywhere, loose and certain, like the furniture belonged to him. He had shaved for it. He wore the gray suit I bought him in 2023, back when I still bought him things. His lawyer asked him to describe the months I was overseas, and Bryce turned toward the bench and gave the judge his warmest, saddest face. "I did everything I could to hold it together," he said. "I paid what I could. I begged the bank. And the whole time she was gone, she sent nothing home, not a dollar. When we lost the house, she blamed me." "You were never here," he said, looking straight at me now. "You never paid a cent." From the second row, his mother nodded. Maribel had worn navy blue and a small gold cross, and she nodded the way she nodded in church, slow and satisfied, as if a difficult truth were finally being spoken aloud. His sister Corinne sat at the far end of the same row with her purse in her lap and her eyes on the door. The house was already gone. That was the part they were counting on. It had sold at a foreclosure auction 11 weeks earlier, while I was still learning it was in danger. There was no house to fight over anymore. There was only the story of who had failed it, and Bryce had come to court to make sure the story was mine. I was in uniform. I had thought about that choice for a long time the night before, and in the end I wore the service uniform because it was true, and because I was tired of dressing down my own life to make them comfortable. Captain, United States Marine Corps. 9 years in, most of them spent doing exactly one thing: reading money. I knew what a ledger looked like when it was telling the truth, what it looked like when it was lying. So I let Bryce talk. I let him build the whole cathedral of it: the sad face, the stress, the sacrifice, the absent wife who sent nothing home. I watched the judge watch him. I watched Maribel nod. I watched Corinne watch the door instead of her brother, which is the tell I would have noticed even if I had known nothing else, because innocent people watch the person testifying and guilty people watch the exits. Every sentence Bryce spoke was another dollar of credibility he was spending on a version of events I was about to make impossible. I did not interrupt. You do not interrupt a man who is digging. When it was my turn, I did not raise my voice. I had learned a long time ago that the people who shout in a courtroom are the people with nothing on paper. "Your Honor," I said, "I sent $18,000 home to save that house. The wire left a base overseas. I would ask the court to subpoena that wire and simply follow it. Follow every dollar from the minute it landed." For a moment, nobody moved. My lawyer, Ruth, set a black binder on the table and opened it without a sound. The forensic accountant we had hired, a quiet woman named Priya Anand, uncapped a pen. At the end of the second row, Corinne stood up. She did it carefully, the way you stand when you are hoping no one will look. She gathered her purse against her chest. She took one step toward the aisle, and then another, and by the time the judge lifted her eyes, Corinne was moving fast. I had spent 9 years learning to read a ledger. I only needed them to open one. But let me back up a little. 5 months earlier, I was sitting in a finance office 8 time zones from home, and the hardest part of my day was a little girl's face on a cracked phone screen. I was deployed with a Marine detachment supporting fleet logistics in the Gulf, which is a plain way of saying I spent my days accounting for other people's money. Fuel contracts, travel claims, disbursement records that had to balance to the penny before anyone slept. It is not the part of the Corps that ends up in movies. It is the part that keeps the movies fed and paid and moving. I was good at it. I had been good at it since I was a lance corporal, and it was the reason I had a commission at all. I enlisted at 18 because college was a door I could not afford to open any other way. I sorted travel claims and disbursement vouchers in a windowless office and discovered, to my own surprise, that I loved it. Numbers did not care where you came from. A column either balanced or it did not. And if it did not, the reason was in there somewhere. Patient. Waiting to be found by whoever was stubborn enough to look. I was stubborn enough. My command noticed. They sent me to a program that turns enlisted Marines into officers. And in 2016, I pinned on the gold bars of a second lieutenant with my mother crying in the second row of a different kind of gathering. The good kind. I tell you this because it matters to what came later. The skill that saved me was not something I learned to fight Bryce. It was the ordinary competence of my whole adult life. When his family looked at me, they saw a wife who was conveniently far away. They did not see 9 years of a woman who could not sleep until the numbers balanced. They handed a forensic accountant to a person who had spent her career being one. That was their single greatest mistake, and they made it because they had never once bothered to see what I actually was. Every night my time, which was early evening for her, my daughter Wren called me from the house in North Carolina. She was 6. She had a gap where her front tooth used to be and a habit of holding the phone too close. So mostly I saw one enormous brown eye and the ceiling fan. "Are you coming home to our house, Mama?" she asked me once near the end of a call, half asleep. "To our house," I said. "The one with the crooked mailbox, I promise." We had bought that house in 2022. I want to be precise about that because the precision turned out to matter more than anything else in this story. I qualified for the loan on my income and my service. I signed the note. My name was the reason the bank said yes. Bryce liked to tell people we bought it together, and in the way that matters to a marriage, we did. But in the way that matters to a court, it was mine, secured by my paycheck and my clearance and my years. Bryce had never been good with money. I knew that when I married him. I told myself it was a small flaw in a decent man, the way some people are bad with directions. His sister Corinne was the one who helped with the books. That was the family phrase for it. Corinne worked at a title company, then a mortgage brokerage, then a bookkeeping service, always near money, never quite steady. When a car payment slipped, Corinne fixed it. When a card ran hot, Corinne moved something around. I used to be grateful for her. I want to be honest about that, too. There was one night, maybe a month into the deployment, when Bryce mentioned that Corinne had helped him get everything organized before I left. He said it lightly. He said she was an authorized user on the household account now so she could pay things while he was busy with work. I remember I was tired, and I remember thinking it was a little strange, and I remember letting it go. I let a lot of small, strange things go that spring. That is a thing I have had to forgive myself for. I should tell you what helping with the books actually looked like, because I lived next to it for years and did not see it for what it was. The Christmas before I deployed, I came into the kitchen and found Corinne at the table with Bryce's laptop open, our bank statements on the screen, a legal pad beside her covered in her handwriting. She did not close the laptop when I walked in. She smiled at me and said, "I am just cleaning up the mess your husband made of the categories. You two would drown without me." Bryce laughed from the couch. I laughed too. I had a hot pan in my hand and a daughter to feed, and it was easier to laugh. I thought I was watching a sister-in-law be generous. I was watching a person learn every door and window of the house she planned to enter. That is the thing about the people who rob you from the inside. They do not break in. You hand them the key and you thank them for holding it. Bryce and I were not a bad marriage on the surface. I want to be fair to the years, because Wren came out of them, and because a story is a lie, if it pretends the villain was always a villain. Bryce could be warm. He remembered how I took my coffee. On our video calls that spring, he would carry the phone around the house so I could see it, the porch, the kitchen, Wren's drawings on the refrigerator, and he would say, "It is all still here, waiting for you." I believed him. I was 8,000 miles away and homesick, and I believed my husband when he showed me my own front door and told me it was waiting. What I did not know, on those calls, was that the door was already being sold out from under the both of us, and that he knew, and that he pointed the camera at everything except the mail. Then, in the second week of May, an email came in from Wren's school. It was about the fall registration deposit. It mentioned almost in passing that our address on file might be changing, and it asked me to confirm. I read it 4 times. I did not understand it, and then slowly I began to. I called Bryce from a stairwell because it was the only quiet place I could find, and the connection was bad, and I made him say it twice. "It is just a paperwork thing," he said. "The mortgage got a little behind. It is being handled." "How far behind?" I said. "A few months. It is nothing. Corinne is on it." A few months. I did the arithmetic while he talked, the way I did arithmetic all day for a living. A few months behind on our loan was not nothing. A few months behind was the exact distance between a home and a foreclosure notice. "Bryce," I said, "send me the servicer's number. I will call them myself." He did not send me the number. What he sent me over the next 2 days was a rising panic dressed up as reassurance. The bank was being unreasonable. There had been a mix-up with a payment. If we could just bring it current, all of it went away. And to bring it current right now this week, before a deadline he kept moving, we needed $18,000. I had $18,000. Deployment does that, if you are careful. There is hazard pay and family separation pay and the simple fact that there is nowhere to spend money on a base in the Gulf. I had been saving it for Wren, for the boring, beautiful things, a bigger college account, a newer car so I would stop worrying about the brakes. I had been saving it for the life I was going to come home to. "Wire it to the household account," Bryce said. "Corinne will walk it to the servicer herself. She knows the loss mitigation people. She can hand them a cashier's check today. I want to tell you I saw it. I did not see it. I saw my daughter's school email and a deadline and a man who sounded like he was drowning, and I did the thing I had been trained my whole career to do in an emergency, which is to move money fast and ask questions after. On the 9th of May, at 6:40 in the morning my time, I walked into the finance office where I worked, and I sent $18,000 home. I used the dispersing channel because it was faster and cleaner than my personal bank, and because part of me, the careful part, wanted a record with a government timestamp on it. The clerk who processed it was a young corporal who could see my hands were not quite steady. "You good, ma'am?" he asked, not looking up, giving me the privacy of the question. "Family thing back home," I said. "Time sensitive." "We will get it moving," he said. He read the amount back to me twice, the way we are trained to, $18,000, and I confirmed it twice, and he keyed it, and the machine did its quiet work. I remember thinking that this was the system working exactly as it should, careful and doubled and stamped, and feeling a small professional comfort in it, even through the fear. I did not yet understand that I was watching the careful part of the world build the one record that the careless part of my family would never be able to erase. I did not know yet that the careful part of me was the only part that would save us. The confirmation printed. I folded it and put it in my breast pocket, and I felt, for 1 hour, like a good mother and a good wife who had reached across the whole world to catch her family before it fell. Then the phone calls stopped being answered. For 3 days, I could not reach Bryce in the evenings. Corinne did not pick up. Maribel texted me a single line about how stressful this all was for everyone, please, and how I should try to trust my family. When Bryce finally called, his voice had changed. The panic was gone. In its place was something flat and rehearsed. "It did not work," he said. "The bank moved the date. It is done, Delia. The house sold." "Sold," I said. "You told me the wire would stop the sale. I sent $18,000 4 days ago. Where is it?" "It is gone. It went into the mess. You should have managed it better from your end. You were never here to see how bad it got." There it was again. You were never here. It would become the whole of their case. 3 words worn smooth from handling. There was one video call near the end that I have played back in my mind more times than any other. Maribel had joined it from Bryce's living room, sitting beside him on the couch that used to be mine, and somewhere off camera I could hear Corinne moving around the kitchen. I had asked one more time, the only question I had. "Where is the $18,000? "Sweetheart," Maribel said, in the gentle voice she used to end conversations. "I think the deployment has been very hard on you. I think you are confused about the timing." "I am not confused about the timing," I said. "I sent it on the 9th of May. I have the confirmation." "You think you sent it," Bryce said. "You were exhausted. You were on the other side of the world. Money is complicated when you are like that." "I account for money for a living, Bryce. It is the one thing I am never confused about." Maribel sighed, a long, patient sigh, as if I were a child refusing to nap. "This is what I mean. This anger, this is not the Delia we know. We are worried about you. We are all just trying to protect Ren from—" And here she paused delicately. "From all of this. From all of this. From me." That was the sentence, dressed up in a mother-in-law's concern. They were not going to argue with me about the money. They were going to argue about my mind, because a woman who is confused cannot be robbed. She can only be pitied. And pity, I was learning, is the perfect crime. It has no fingerprints. I heard Corinne laugh at something on the television in the background. It was a small laugh, easy, the laugh of a person who is not worried at all. I hung up. I sat in the rented dark for a while. And then I did the thing that changed everything, which was to stop trying to be believed and start building something that would not need their belief. A neighbor sent me a photograph the next week. A man I did not know was standing on my porch with a clipboard next to my crooked mailbox under the window of the room where my daughter slept. Bryce told me Ren was staying with Maribel now. He told me it was better for her. He told me a lot of things in that flat new voice, and none of them mattered anymore because I had stopped listening to their words and started collecting their records. For the first time in my marriage, I stopped talking and started saving screenshots. I saved the texts. I saved the call logs. I saved the school email and the neighbor's photograph and the wire confirmation from my breast pocket, which I photographed under the light of my rack at 2 a.m. so that a second copy would exist somewhere in the world. They thought the deployment made me easy to rob. They had it exactly backward. The deployment had put a government timestamp on the one thing they most needed to disappear. I came home in the middle of June to a rented room and a daughter I had to ask permission to see. The homecoming I had promised Wren did not exist anymore. There was no house with a crooked mailbox to walk into. There was a furnished room I found near the base, a duffel bag, and a folder of screenshots that I had started to think of as the only solid ground I owned. Bryce had filed for divorce while I was in transit. His filing described me as an absent spouse who had abandoned the family finances. It asked for custody of Wren and for the court to note that I had failed to contribute during the deployment. He had taken the 3 words and made them into a legal theory. For about a week, I did the thing that people do, which is to try to explain myself to people who benefit from misunderstanding me. I called Bryce. I called Maribel. I wrote long messages about the wire, about the $18,000, about the school email. They answered with pity, which is the cruelest weapon a family has because it cannot be argued with. Poor Delia. She is not well. The deployment was hard on her. She is confused about what happened to the money. The first time I saw Wren after I came home, it was in the parking lot of a fast food restaurant because that was the neutral ground Maribel would agree to. I sat in my car for 10 minutes early, watching the door, my hands not quite steady. When Maribel walked her across the lot, Wren saw me and broke into a run, and I got down on the asphalt on my knees, in my only clean shirt, and caught her. And she smelled like somebody else's laundry soap, and she was heavier than she had been in January. And she said into my neck, "You came home to the wrong house." "What do you mean, baby?" I said. "Grandma's house," she said. "Not our house. Where is our house?" I looked up at Maribel, over my daughter's shoulder. Maribel looked away. And something in me that had been shaking since the 9th of May went very still and very cold and very clear. They could tell a courtroom I was confused. They could tell a judge I was reckless. But they had made my 6-year-old ask me where her house went, and I was going to get her an answer that was written down and stamped and impossible to argue with. "We are going to have a house again," I told Wren. "I promise you, and this time I am going to keep the receipt." She did not know what that meant. She just held on. I held on longer. I stopped waiting to be believed when I met Ruth Ellery. Ruth was 61 years old and had been practicing law in that county since before I was born. Her office was one room over a hardware store with a window air conditioner that rattled and a desk buried in files that she somehow navigated by memory. She did not have a receptionist. She poured me coffee in a mug that said "World's Okayest Golfer," sat down across from me, and listened for 40 minutes without interrupting once. When I finished, she did not tell me she was sorry. I have never been more grateful to a person for not telling me they were sorry. "Let me make sure I have this," she said. "You wired $18,000 into an account your husband controlled on his promise that it would reinstate the mortgage. The mortgage was never reinstated. The house sold. And now, in a divorce filing, he says you sent nothing." "Yes," I said. "Then this is not a divorce fight, Captain. Not first. This is a fraud case with a divorce stapled to the back of it." She tapped the wire confirmation on her desk, the one I had carried across the world in my breast pocket. "People think money is slippery. It is the opposite. Money is the least slippery thing there is. Every dollar you sent touched something on its way out, and everything it touched wrote it down. A wire is a fingerprint. It proves who touched the money and when." "They will just keep saying I imagined it," I said. "Let them." Ruth smiled for the first time. "Let them keep talking. The more they explain, the more they commit to a version of events. And a version of events is a wonderful thing to have when the paper says something different. Our job is not to argue with them. Our job is to open the ledger in a room where they cannot close it." She wanted 3 things. She wanted the certified copy of my wire from the disbursing office with its government timestamp. She wanted a subpoena for the full history of the joint household account, every transfer, every authorized user, every signature card. And she wanted a forensic accountant because a judge would believe a stranger with credentials before she believed a wronged wife with a folder. The accountant she called was named Priya Anand. Priya was a certified public accountant and a certified fraud examiner, and she had the specific calm of a person who has watched a great many people lie about numbers and has never once been impressed by it. She met us the following week. She listened to the shape of it. Then she asked exactly one question, and it was the question that organized the rest of my life. "When the 18,000 landed in that account," Priya said, "how many hours passed before it started to move? Because fraud has a tempo. Honest money sits, guilty money runs." "I do not know yet," I said. "I only know it never reached the mortgage." "Good. That is the right thing to know first." She opened a slim notebook and drew 3 columns without looking at them, the way I draw columns out of muscle. "Here is what most people get wrong. They think proving fraud means finding a confession. It almost never does. It means building a timeline so tight that no innocent explanation can fit inside it. A single transfer between family members is nothing. A single transfer at the wrong hour, into the wrong account, on the wrong day, for the exact amount that was supposed to save a house that then did not get saved, is a signature. My job is to lay those facts down, side by side, in order, with the clock running, until the only story that fits the timeline is the true one. And if they lie on the stand, I said, then they will lie into a shape the timeline already contradicts, Priya said. That is the best thing they can do for us. A lie under oath does not weaken a paper trail. It hangs itself on it. I thought about all the months I had spent trying to be believed, and how useless it had been, and how this quiet woman with her 3 columns had just described a way of being believed that did not require anyone to trust me at all. It only required the money to tell the truth, and money, it turned out, cannot help itself. She did not promise me the house. She did not promise me anything. She promised me the truth, on paper, in a form a judge could hold. Ruth signed the first subpoena that afternoon and sent it to the bank. And for the first time since the 9th of May, I was not chasing my family. They were about to start answering to me. The dispersing office answered first because the military keeps its records the way I keep mine. I had emailed the finance chief I had served with overseas, a senior enlisted Marine who ran the office like an audit that never ended. He did not ask me why I needed a certified copy of a 5-month-old wire. He knew what a certified copy was for. He called me back once on a bad line, and all he said was, "Captain, I pulled it. It is clean, it is stamped, and it is in the mail. Whatever this is, the paper's on your side." Then, after a pause, because he was the kind of Marine who noticed things, "You send $18,000 home in one morning. Somebody on the other end had plans for it. Get them." "I intend to, Gunny," I said. "Good," he said, and hung up because he was also the kind of Marine who did not waste words. 3 days later, a sealed, stamped record arrived. $18,000, my name, the receiving account, the routing number, and a timestamp reading the 9th of May, 6:41 in the morning, Arabian Standard Time. I sat with that timestamp for a long while. On the 9th of May, at the moment Bryce would later swear under oath that I sent nothing home, I had been standing in a finance office in the Gulf watching a confirmation print. The clocks did not care about his story. The clocks had been on my side the entire time, and I had not known it. Then the servicer's records came back, and they told the other half. The company that held our mortgage kept a payment history the way all of them do, a long gray column of dates and amounts. Ruth walked her finger down it while Priya read over her shoulder. There was our history, steady for years, my name, the automatic payments. And then, starting in February, nothing. A missed payment, another, a late notice, a default notice, a notice of intent to accelerate, a notice of sale, month after month of silence where the money should have been. Nowhere in that column was there $18,000. Nowhere in that column was there 18 cents of mine. I stared at that gray column for a long time. It was, in its way, the loneliest document I had ever read. Not because of what it said, but because of what it did not say. All those blank months, all that silence where the payments should have been. Behind every empty row was a night I had been on a video call with my husband, watching him carry the phone around a house he was already letting die, telling me it was all still there, waiting for me. The ledger did not accuse anybody. It just recorded the absence of the thing I had trusted, month after month, in a straight, quiet line. Sometimes the cruelest evidence is the evidence of nothing happening. "So the wire reached the bank," I said, "the household bank, but it never reached the mortgage." "Correct," Priya said. "The money landed in the household account on the 9th of May. The mortgage servicer never received a reinstatement. Not that week. Not ever. Which means the $18,000 went into that account and came out of it going somewhere that was not your loan." She looked up at me. "That is what the joint account statement is going to tell us. And I would like to know how many hours it took." Ruth sent the second subpoena that same day, this one to the bank that held the household account, demanding the full statement for May and the signature cards for every person with access. She told me it would take a week or two. She told me to sleep. I did not sleep much. I lay in the rented room and I thought about tempo. Honest money sits, guilty money runs. I had a feeling, deep in the part of me that had balanced 1,000 ledgers, that this money had run very fast indeed. The statement came back on a Thursday, and it was worse and cleaner than I had let myself imagine. Priya spread it on Ruth's crowded desk, and the three of us leaned over it under the rattling air conditioner. She had highlighted the 9th of May in yellow. There near the top was my wire arriving $18,000 in at 9 in the morning Eastern Time, which was 6:40 in the Gulf. The confirmation and the deposit shaking hands across 8 time zones. And then below it, the money began to run. At 11:14 that same morning, 2 hours after it landed, a transfer went out. $7,500 to an account ending in numbers I did not recognize. At 12:40, a second transfer, $6,000 to the same unfamiliar account. At 1:52 in the afternoon, a third, $4,500. This one to purchase a cashier's check. $18,000 in, $7,500 out, $6,000 out, $4,500 out. All of it gone in 3 moves, inside 4 hours. On the same afternoon, it arrived. Not a dollar of it walked to the mortgage servicer. Not a dollar of it stopped the sale it had been sent to stop. I had known, in the abstract, that they had taken the money. Knowing it and seeing it are different rooms. Seeing it was the timestamps: 11:14, 12:40, 1:52. In the hours after I sent my daughter's future across the world, believing I had caught my family before they fell, someone on the other end had sat at a screen and moved that money out in 3 efficient strokes, checking the clock, beating me to my own rescue. While I was still folding the confirmation into my breast pocket and letting myself feel, for 1 hour, like a good mother, they were already spending it. I did not cry. I had expected to, looking at it, and I did not. Something colder than crying happened instead. Ruth watched my face and seemed to recognize it. "There it is," she said quietly. "That is the look I want in the courtroom, not tears. That." She tapped the highlighted row. "Whose account is that, Captain? That is the only question left." "Whose account is that?" I said. My voice did not sound like mine. "That," Priya said, "is what the signature cards are for." The signature cards were in the same envelope. The joint household account had 3 people with access: Bryce, me, and, added as an authorized user on the 28th of December, 11 days before I deployed in January, Corinne Merrick. Her signature was there, looping and confident, on a form Bryce had signed as the account holder. 11 days before I left the country, they had given his sister a key to the account I would later wire $18,000 into. Priya pulled the receiving account details, and the picture finished itself. The account that received the $7,500 and the $6,000, the first 2 transfers, was an account in Corinne's name. The $4,500 cashier's check had been made out to a title company, and its remitter was Corinne. $18,000 in, Priya said quietly, moving her pen down the page. 3 transfers out, same afternoon, same 4 hours. 2 of them into her own account, 1 of them a check she bought. This is not a mistake. Mistakes do not move in a straight line to one person. There was one more thing, and Ruth found it. She had subpoenaed the foreclosure file too, out of thoroughness, and buried in it was a document with my rights signed away. Federal law gives a deployed service member protections against exactly this: a shield around your home while you are gone, and for a window after you return. There is a form to invoke it and a form to waive it. Someone had waived mine. The signature on the waiver was supposed to be authorization from the borrower. The borrower was me, and I had been in the Gulf, and I had signed nothing. I did most of my work on that case at night after Wren fell asleep. By July, Maribel had grudgingly agreed to let Wren stay with me 2 nights a week in the rented room, and I would tuck her into the little bed by the window and wait for her breathing to slow and then sit at the card table with Priya's spreadsheets and the bank statements spread under a lamp. There is a particular loneliness to reading a ledger of your own betrayal at 1 a.m. while your child sleeps 6 feet away. But there is a particular strength in it, too. Every time my eyes blurred, and I wanted to stop, I would look over at the shape of her under the blanket and remember that the $18,000 I was tracing had been meant for her, and that the people who took it had been willing to make her ask me where her house went. Then I would look back down and keep reading. One of those nights she woke up and padded over and put her chin on my shoulder and looked at the pages full of numbers and circles. "Is that homework?" she said. "Kind of," I said. "It is Mama making sure something adds up." "Does it add up?" I looked at the 3 transfers at the times beside them at the account with Corinne's name on it. "It is starting to," I said. "Go back to sleep, baby. Mama's winning." She believed me, the way she believed me about everything, and she went back to the little bed, and I sat there in the lamplight and made it true. While I stared at the waiver with my forged authorization on it, my phone buzzed on Ruth's desk. It was a text from Bryce. He had heard somehow through the thin walls of that family that I was pulling old bank records. "Why are you digging up statements from months ago?" it read. "That is not going to change anything. Let it go." Ruth read it upside down and laughed once, a short, dry sound. "He is nervous," she said. "Good. Nervous men keep talking." She squared the pages into a stack and set her hand flat on top of them. "We have enough to open the ledger, Captain. Now we let a judge open it in a room where none of them can close it." The hearing was set for a Tuesday in August in a county courtroom with tall windows and a judge named Marion Selby. Judge Selby was a small, exact woman who wore reading glasses on a chain and did not tolerate speeches. Ruth had appeared in front of her many times. "She does not care how you feel," Ruth told me in the hallway. "She cares what you can prove. That is the best kind of judge to have when the truth is on your side, and the worst kind to have when it is not. Today it is on ours." The case was not a divorce hearing. Ruth had structured it as a civil action to set aside the foreclosure sale and to recover the diverted funds, with the fraud laid out plainly. That mattered, because it put the money at the center of the room instead of the marriage. It meant that when Bryce tried to make it about my absence, the judge kept steering it back to the account. I had barely slept the night before. Not from fear exactly. From the strange stillness that comes the night before, a thing you have prepared for so completely that there is nothing left to do but arrive. I had laid the uniform out on the back of the chair. I had read the binder one more time, not because I needed to, but because holding it steadied me. At around midnight, Wren had wandered out for a glass of water and found me at the table and asked if I was nervous, and I told her the truth, which was that I was ready, and that ready and nervous can feel almost the same from the inside. In the hallway outside the courtroom that morning, Ruth straightened the collar of my uniform like a mother sending a child to school, and she said one last thing. "Remember, you are not here to make them believe you. That door closed months ago, and it is never opening. You are here to hand a judge a set of facts. Facts do not need anyone to believe them. They just need to be true and in order. Yours are both." Then she opened the door and we walked in. They came in as a family the way they did everything. Bryce in the gray suit, Maribel in navy blue taking her seat in the second row with her gold cross in her folded hands. Corinne at the end of the same row, her purse in her lap. They had a lawyer, a smooth young man who seemed to believe that confidence was a kind of evidence. Ruth called the mortgage servicer's witness first. His name was Desmond Hale, and he worked in the default operations department, and he had the tired precision of a man who reads ledgers for a living, which meant I trusted him on sight. Ruth kept him simple. She put the payment history on the screen. "Mr. Hale, did your company ever receive a reinstatement payment on this loan in May of this year?" "No." "Did you receive $18,000 from any source to bring the loan current?" "No, ma'am. The last payment of any kind we received was in January. After that, the account went delinquent and proceeded to sale. So, if someone testified that $18,000 was sent to save this house," Ruth said, "and if that money existed, it did not come to you." "We never received a reinstatement," Desmond Hale said. "Not $18,000, not 18 cents. Their lawyer tried to make it about the timeline, about how the sale date had been firm, about how even a late payment would not have helped. Ruth let him. Then she asked Hale one last question. "Mr. Hale, was there a Service Members Civil Relief Act protection available on this loan, given that the borrower was on active duty and deployed?" "There was." "Was it invoked?" "No, there is a waiver in the file." "And a waiver of a service member's rights," Ruth said, "requires the service member's own authorization, not a spouse's, not a sibling's, the service member's." "That is correct." "Mr. Hale, the waiver in your file, was it accompanied by a copy of any identification, any orders, anything establishing that the person who signed it was the deployed service member herself?" Desmond Hale looked at the file in front of him. "No, ma'am. It came in with the loss mitigation paperwork. It was treated as authorized because it arrived through the account holder of record." "The account holder of record being the husband?" "Yes." So a document waiving a deployed Marine's federal protections, purportedly signed by her, was accepted while she was demonstrably on the other side of the world, with nothing to verify it was her at all. "That is what the file shows," he said. He said it plainly, without defensiveness, An honest man reading an honest record, and it was the most damaging testimony of the morning precisely because he took no pleasure in it. I watched Bryce's lawyer write something and cross it out. Ruth called me next. I took the stand in my service uniform, and I put the certified wire confirmation into evidence. And I told the court, in plain sentences, what I had done. I described the school email, the phone calls, the deadline that kept moving, the $18,000, the dispersing channel, the timestamp. I did not editorialize. Ruth had drilled that into me in her office over the rattle of the air conditioner. Do not tell her it was cruel, she had said. Tell her what happened and let her decide it was cruel. She will get there faster than you can drag her. Then their lawyer stood up to cross-examine me, and he made the mistake I had been hoping he would make. He tried to run their whole case through my testimony. Captain Merrick, he said, isn't it true that you were out of the country for the entire period in question? Yes. You could not see the mail. You could not attend to the household finances in person. I could not stand at the mailbox. No, I could send $18,000 across 8 time zones in a single morning. I did. You are asking this court to believe you managed your household finances from a war zone. I am asking this court to read a bank statement, I said. I managed money for a living on that deployment for an entire Marine detachment. The money balanced to the penny every night. The only account that did not balance was the one 3 people could touch. I could only touch it from very far away. 2 of the 3 were in the same house. He should have stopped there. He asked one more. Isn't it possible you simply do not understand what happened to the money? It is possible for someone, I said. It is not possible for me. Understanding what happened to money is the specific thing my country pays me to do. He sat down. Judge Selby did not write anything, which by then I understood was its own kind of verdict. Then Ruth called Priya Anand, and the room changed temperature. Priya did not perform. She set up a single board with a simple diagram, the kind a child could follow, which is the most dangerous kind of exhibit there is. 1 box at the top, $18,000 in, the 9th of May, 9 in the morning, 3 arrows leading down and out, 7,500, 6,000, 4,500, times beside each one, 1114, 1240, 152. On the morning of the 9th of May, Priya said, $18,000 arrived in the household account by wire from an overseas military dispersing office. I have the certified confirmation time-stamped. Within 4 hours, the entire sum left the account in 3 transfers. She touched each arrow. 2 of these transfers, totaling $13,500, went to an account held in the name of Corinne Merrick. The third, $4,500, purchased a cashier's check remitted by Corinne Merrick to a title company. None of it went to the mortgage servicer. I compared these records against the servicer's ledger. There is no overlap. The money that was described as a rescue never went anywhere near the thing it was supposed to rescue. Ms. Anand, Ruth said, in your professional opinion, is this consistent with a mistake? No. A mistake is random. This is directed. $18,000 arrived and was routed in a single afternoon almost entirely to one person, with the remainder spent on her instruction. Honest money sits. This money ran, and it ran to a destination. The smooth young lawyer stood and suggested that Corinne had simply been helping manage household expenses, that transfers between family members were normal, that this proved nothing. Then the defense will have no trouble, Ruth said mildly, explaining why household expenses required moving a deployed Marine's mortgage reinstatement into the sister's personal account within 2 hours of its arrival. On the very afternoon the family now says the house could not be saved. Ruth was not finished with Priya, and the last piece was the one that made the whole shape of it clear. Ms. Anand, the third transfer, the $4,500, where did that go? It purchased a cashier's check, Priya said. The check was made out to a title company. I obtained the title company's records. That $4,500 became a deposit on a property. Which property? The subject property. Priya let that sit for a moment. The house at the center of this case. The cashier's check, funded by the captain's own $18,000, was used as an earnest deposit in the purchase of her house at the foreclosure auction by the buyer of record. And who was the buyer of record? An individual whose address on the purchase documents, Priya said, matches the residential address on Corinne Merrick's own banking records. The same address. For the first time, the room understood the whole machine. They had not simply stolen $18,000. They had used the captain's own rescue money as the down payment to buy her foreclosed house out from under her, cheap at the sale that money had been sent to prevent, and kept it in the family with her name scrubbed off the deed. It was not a theft. It was a circle. My money had been turned into the weapon that took my home, and they had signed their names to every link of it because they never once believed I would be able to follow the money across 8 time zones and back. Judge Selby made a small note. She had been making very few notes, which Ruth had told me was the thing to watch for. Judge Selby only wrote down what she intended to use. Then Bryce took the stand, and he did the only thing he knew how to do. He doubled down. His lawyer led him gently through the sad version, the stress of the deployment, the confusion about the money, how hard he had tried. And then, because he could not help himself, because the 3 words had worked on family and friends for months, and he had come to believe they were true, he turned to the judge and said them again. I paid every bill I could while she was overseas playing soldier, he said. She was never here. She never paid a cent. When we lost the house, she needed someone to blame, so she blamed me and my family. From the second row, Maribel nodded. Slow, certain, in church. Judge Selby set down her pen. She took off her reading glasses and let them hang against her chest on their chain. And she looked at Bryce for a moment with an expression I can only describe as patience running out. Mr. Merrick, she said, the court has in front of it a certified wire confirmation showing that $18,000 was sent from an overseas military account on the 9th of May at 6:41 in the morning, that time zone. The court also has a bank statement showing that same $18,000 arriving in your household account that morning and leaving it within 4 hours. She leaned forward slightly. So the court is going to ask you a very simple question, and I would like you to think carefully before you answer it. Where did the money really go? The room was completely silent. I have been in silent rooms. I have stood in a finance office at midnight when a number would not balance and everyone was afraid to breathe. This was quieter than that. I did not raise my voice. This was the moment I had folded a wire confirmation into my breast pocket for 5 months and 8,000 miles ago, and I found that I did not need to shout after all. Your Honor, I said, I would ask the court to read the message my husband sent his sister on the afternoon of the 9th of May. It was produced from his own phone records under subpoena. It is in the binder, tab 9. Ruth handed the page up. Judge Selby put her glasses back on and read it once to herself. Then she read it aloud, in the flat, clear voice judges use when they want a sentence to land on the record and stay there. Timestamp, the 9th of May, 11:02 in the morning, from the respondent's number to the number the records identify as Corinne Merrick. The message reads, Wire is in. Move it today before she checks the app. Then a second message, 11:04. It reads, All of it. We will figure out the house later. 12 minutes after that message, $7,500 had left the account. Everyone in the room could do the arithmetic now. I watched them do it. At the end of the second row, Corinne stood up. She stood the way she had done everything for that family, quietly, hoping the movement would not be counted. She pulled her purse to her chest. She took one step toward the aisle, and Judge Selby's eyes came up. And Corinne stopped pretending. She ran. She went down the aisle fast, heels loud on the old floor, and she pushed through the courtroom doors. And they swung and clapped behind her, and the sound of them was the loudest thing that had happened all day. Nobody chased her. There was nowhere to run to. Her name was already on the transfers. Her signature was already on the authorized user card. Her account had already received $13,500. Running from a courtroom does not erase a ledger. It only tells everyone in the room that you already know what the ledger says. Judge Selby watched the doors settle. Then she turned back to Bryce, who had gone the color of the paper in front of him, and she said very calmly, You may step down, Mr. Merrick. I have what I need. She ruled from the bench, which Ruth told me later she almost never does. She found that the $18,000 had been obtained by misrepresentation and diverted, that the waiver of my federal protections was invalid because I had never authorized it, and that the foreclosure sale, built on that invalid waiver and that diversion, would be set aside. She ordered the $18,000 restored with damages and my legal costs on top of it, and she referred the matter, Bryce and Corinne both, to the district attorney for the fraud and the forged waiver. Before she rose, Judge Selby looked at me over the top of her reading glasses. She did not offer sympathy. She was not that kind of judge, and I was glad of it because sympathy was the weapon they had used on me for months, and I had come to distrust the sound of it. "Captain Merrick," she said, "for what it is worth from this bench, the records in this case are among the cleanest I have seen presented. You did not ask this court to take your word. You gave it a timeline it could not argue with." She paused. "That is not luck. That is discipline. The court thanks you for your service, and it is sorry it was needed at home." Then she gathered her papers and was gone, and it was the only soft thing anyone said in that room all day, and it came from the one person who had refused to feel sorry for me, which is why I have kept it. "This was never about winning," I said to Ruth in the hallway afterward, and I meant it. "It was about the truth being heavier than their story." "It usually is," Ruth said. "People just forget to weigh it." Maribel found me in the hallway before I reached the elevator. She had lost the church face. What was left underneath it was older and harder, and for the first time in all the years I had known her, unsure. "You did not have to do it this way," she said. "In front of people. You could have kept it in the family." I looked at her for a long moment. I had imagined this conversation 100 times in the rented dark, and in all of those versions, I said something that cut. But standing there, with the ruling still warm on the record behind me, I found I did not want to cut anything. I wanted to be understood exactly once, and then I wanted to leave. "You sat in the second row and nodded while your son told a judge I abandoned my own daughter," I said. "You called me confused. You made a 6-year-old ask me where her house went. The family is where this happened, Maribel. The courtroom is just where it stopped." She did not have an answer. There is no answer to a timeline. I stepped around her and I walked to the elevator, and I did not look back. And that walk was the closest thing to peace I had felt since the 9th of May. The district attorney's office moved on the referral in its own time. There were charges for the diversion and for the forged waiver of my federal protections. And the process ground forward the way those processes do, slowly, with its own paperwork. I gave a statement when they asked, and then I let it go because Ruth told me something in that hallway that I have held on to since. "You won the part that was yours to win," she said. "The house, the money, your name on the record, clean. What happens to them now belongs to the state, not to you. Do not spend the rest of your life in a courtroom you already walked out of." Behind us, through the courtroom doors, I could see Bryce still sitting at the table, where they had left him. His mother had not gone to him. The chair at the end of the second row, where Corinne had been, was still faintly rocking. "I want to tell you that someone apologized." No one did. That is the part people find hardest to believe when I tell this story. Harder than the wire, harder than the sister running for the door. They want the ending where Bryce weeps on a porch and asks to be forgiven, where Maribel takes my hand and says she is sorry. She nodded. It did not happen. The district attorney's office took the referral. There were charges, and there were lawyers, and eventually there were consequences that were not mine to hand out and that I chose not to follow closely, because I had a daughter to raise and a life to rebuild, and only so many hours in a day. Maribel called me once, about 2 months after the hearing. I almost did not answer. When I did, she did not say she was sorry. She asked, in a small voice, whether she could still see Ren. I stood on the little porch of the rented room, and I looked at the crooked light coming through the screen, and I thought about all the versions of that answer I could give. The cruel one, the satisfying one, the one that would make her feel a fraction of what her nodding had cost me. "You can see her," I said. "On my terms, in a public place, when I am there. You will not talk to her about the case, or about her father, or about me. If that ever changes, this ends. Do you understand me?" There was a long pause. "Yes," she said. "Then we will start with an hour at the park," I said, and I hung up, and I did not feel triumphant. I felt clean. There is a difference between the two that took me most of a year to learn. Triumph wants an audience. Triumph would have had me replay the courtroom for anyone who would listen, would have had me keep a little private highlight reel of Corinne running for the door. I understand people who need that. For a while, I thought I would need it too. But triumph keeps you tied to the people who wronged you because it needs them to stay small so you can stay tall. And I did not want to spend another year of my life measuring myself against Bryce and his mother and his sister. Clean is different. Clean does not need them at all. Clean is what is left when you finally stop carrying the weight of proving yourself and notice that your arms are empty and your hands are free. I did not pursue Corinne beyond what the court had already set in motion. I could have. There is a version of me that would have made it a mission, that would have called her employers and her landlords and made sure everyone she met knew what she had done. I understood that version of me. I had met her at 2 a.m. under the light of my rack, photographing a wire confirmation, promising myself that they would all pay. But paying them back was not the same as getting my life back, and I only had the strength for one of those. I chose mine. The hardest grace was not the one I gave Maribel or the one I withheld from Corinne. It was the one I had to find for Wren's sake, about her father, because Wren still loved him. She was 6, and he was her dad, and no ruling from any bench changes that arithmetic. One night, months after the hearing, she asked me from the little bed by the window whether her father was a bad man. I sat down on the edge of the mattress, and I thought about every true and bitter thing I could have said, and I didn't say any of them. Your dad did something wrong with money that was supposed to take care of us, I said. That is real, and it is not your fault, and it is not your job to fix it, but you are allowed to love him. Loving somebody and knowing they were wrong can live in the same heart. Mine does. Do you still love him? She asked. I loved who I thought he was, I said. I am always going to love that he helped make you. She fell asleep on that, satisfied the way children are when the truth is offered to them plainly and at their size. I sat there a while longer. I had decided, somewhere in those months, that I would not make my daughter carry my ledger. She could have her father, on supervised and lawful terms, without ever once being asked to hate him for me. That was the most expensive grace of all, and it was the only one that was truly for her and not for me. Bryce signed the divorce without ceremony in the end. There was no scene, no last speech. His lawyer sent the papers, and I read every line the way Priya had taught me to read a ledger, and I signed. The last time I saw him in person, he did not look at me. He looked at the table. I had spent years wanting Bryce to look at me and see what I was worth. I walked out of that room, having stopped needing him to. Grace, I have decided, is not the same as reconciliation. Some people are owed a door back into your life, and some people are owed only the quiet dignity of your absence. Grace is refusing to become what they were. It is choosing not to spend the rest of your one life keeping a ledger of the harm, penny by penny, when you could be spending it on a 6-year-old with a gap in her teeth. I kept the key to my own front door. That turned out to be the only thing I needed to keep. A year later, I stood in the kitchen of the house with the crooked mailbox, listening to my daughter breathe in the next room. The foreclosure sale had been set aside, and after a long gray winter of paperwork, the house came back to us. Back to my name, the name that had qualified for it in the first place. It needed work. The people who had bought it at auction had not loved it, and it showed. But it was ours. And Wren had her old room back, the one under the window where a stranger with a clipboard had once stood. The first weekend we were back, I went out to the crooked mailbox with a level and a bag of concrete mix because it had leaned since the day we moved in, and I had always meant to fix it and never had. Wren sat on the front step and supervised. I dug out the old post and set a new one and held the level against it until the little bubble floated dead center, and I poured the concrete, and I stood there with mud to my elbows while it set. It was a small thing. It was the smallest thing. But I had spent a year fighting to get back a house I did not even own on paper anymore in the eyes of the people who took it. And now I was standing in my own yard, making one crooked thing straight, and I had to put my muddy hand over my mouth for a second so my daughter would not see me come apart over a mailbox. "Is it straight now, Mama?" she called from the step. "It is straight now," I said when I could. "It is going to stay that way." The $18,000 came back too, with the damages on top of it. I did not spend it on a newer car or on myself. I put it into a trust for Wren, every dollar of it. The boring, beautiful thing I had been trying to build for her the whole time. It felt right that the exact money they had tried to steal from her future was the money that now sat guarding it. I got the statement in the mail sometimes, and I would look at the balance and think, There you are. You ran, and you came home. I understand now that this was the whole point, the part I could not have explained to anyone in the worst of it. The $18,000 was never really about $18,000. Ruth could have negotiated a settlement in a back room. There were quieter ways to get money back. I did not want the quiet ways. I wanted it on the record, in open court, with the timeline standing up in front of everyone who had called me confused, because the thing they had actually tried to take from me was not the money, and was not even the house. It was my standing as a person who could be believed. They wanted to make me the unreliable one, the emotional one, the wife who did not understand her own life. And you cannot get that back in a back room. You can only get it back in the light, with the paper doing the talking. So I put the money where they had aimed it in the first place, into my daughter's future, and every time I saw the balance, I understood it as proof of the one thing they had never counted on. I had been believed. It was written down. In the spring, my name went before a promotion board, and it went well. There is an oak leaf ahead of me now, and a new billet, and the strange, soft feeling of a future that belongs to me again. Wren tells people her mother is a Marine who is good at finding money, which is close enough to the truth that I let it stand. People ask me sometimes, when they hear a piece of this, whether I regret marrying him, whether I wish I had seen it sooner, whether I am angry. I am not angry anymore, and that is not because I forgave anybody. It is because anger, like triumph, is a leash, and I decided I had been led around by these people for long enough. I do not wish I had seen it sooner, because seeing it sooner would have meant becoming a person who watches her own family for knives. And I would rather be a person who trusted too easily once and learned to keep her receipts than a person who never trusted at all. And no, I do not regret the marriage, because the marriage made the girl asleep down the hall, and I would sign that note again, knowing everything every time. If my story has taught you anything, let it be this. They can take the house, they can take the money out of the account, and the years off your marriage and the peace out of your sleep, but they cannot take the record, and the record is the truth, patient and time-stamped and waiting. Keep your receipts. Keep your calm. When people who should love you decide you are easy to rob, do not shout. Open the ledger in a room where they cannot close it and let the paper say what you already know. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to hear that quiet endurance is not the same as weakness. If you have ever been disbelieved by your own family, tell me in the comments. I read them, and you are not alone, and you are not confused about what happened to you. And if you want more stories about courage, justice, and hope, stories about ordinary people who refuse to become bitter, subscribe, and stay with us. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening to the end of mine. The end.